they just didn't expect how I'm gonna be, how it's gonna be in the ring. They were shocked. They were shocked. They just like, they didn't know. They were so confused. They didn't know what to do. Shannon Ryan was like, from the 5th round, she was like, she was so tired and just breathing heavily. They just didn't expect it. And they gave me like week notice. They thought, oh, it's gonna be easy fight for Shannon. Maybe she stopped her. She will stop her or something. But no, it didn't happen. And yeah, and I think I did a really good job in that ring. So not with Jasmina, not with me. It's never gonna happen with Jasmina. I'm always ready, you know. I'm always ready.
That is Poland's own Jasmina Zapotoczna giving her account of events in the Shannon Ryan fight. That Shannon got more than she bargained for when Jasmina, a late replacement, she was standing in for Emma Doolin. Some people thought Jasmina beat Shannon, and there was no question, no debate as to whether or not Jasmina beat Maisie Rose. She must have left an impression because they brought her back to fight another unbeaten matchroom up-and-comer in Maisie Rose, who she outboxed thoroughly. Now she's fighting unbeaten Chloe Watson. Chloe Watson, who's 24 years old, to Jasmina, who's 30, scheduled for 10 rounds in the women's flyweight division. Flyweight, that's where Gabriela Alaniz reigns as that division's unified champion, and where Gabby Fundora, has the IBF title. That's where this contest is taking place between Jasmina and Chloe. Jasmina sports professional record of 8 wins with 1 loss, no draws, no recorded knockouts, not yet. More the boxer than the puncher. Long and limber for the weight. You can see there's plenty of room for Jasmina to fill out, to see herself one day campaigning as a flyweight or maybe even a bantamweight. Because she's so svelte. So fit and trim, tight and taut at flyweight. She could easily fill out at superfly bantam, maybe even as high as super bantam, though. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. She's fighting Chloe Watson. Chloe Watson sports professional record, an unblemished record of 8 wins with no losses, no draws, no recorded knockouts, not yet. She's not that big a puncher, but I would say she's a bit more mean-spirited than Jasmina. She's a mid-range to inside fighter, an athletic one. I wouldn't say that she's as aggressive as either Shannon Ryan or Maisie Rose, but she is a mid-range fighter like their mid-range fighters. That's her sweet spot, like it's their sweet spot. That is where Chloe does her best work. The question, can she do a better job than Shannon Ryan did? Can she do a better job than Maisie Rose did? Or is Jasmina about to beat another unbeaten Brit? Chloe Watson saw action 3 times last year, and she's already seen action once this one. Back in June, opposite the ring, Kate Radomska. A 6-rounder. Chloe has fought mostly 4-rounders and 6-rounders. She's only ever been 10 rounds once. Just once, and that was in December of last year, opposite the ring, Justine Lalaman. The fight with Jasmina is scheduled for 10 rounds, and you do have to wonder, how is Chloe going to do? Is she going to do better than Shannon? Is she going to do better than Maisie? We don't know the exact tale of the tape, the exact height and the exact length between the two fighters, though looking at them and having seen them in action, I'd wager that Jasmina is the taller, longer fighter of the two, the long and limber fighter, whereas Chloe is a little bit more compact. So if the discrepancy in height and length is similar to what it was with Maisie Rose, the question then becomes, can Chloe do a better job of closing the distance than Maisie did? Because Maisie, who was shorter than Jasmina, she struggled. She struggled to get within striking distance of Jasmina. She struggled to get close to her. Jasmina's coming off of 2 consecutive wins, one over Gemma Ruig, then the more recent one over Maisie Rose this past July. If the tale of the tape is similar in this fight to her previous fight, Jasmina is likely going to try to replicate that performance by moving lateral, hanging back, and staying behind the straight punches, walking Chloe into counters as Chloe tries to close the distance. And the question is, can Chloe close the distance more effectively than Maisie did? Because if she can't, she's gonna lose. She might. You're facing a tall, long, and limber fighter that knows how to use their height and their length and move around. That's the assignment. You have to get close to them before you can do anything. Can Chloe do it? Chloe Watson is a Wasserman Promotions fighter. Wasserman, that's Kale and Nisei Saraland. That's the banner that she fights under. They do seem invested in her. They do a good job of keeping her active and keeping her busy, but now they're stepping her up. I've seen Chloe in action. She's very good, but this is not a developmental fight. This is not a learning fight. This is a fight. A situation where she could lose. And even though she's the house fighter, hey, Maisie Rose was the house fighter.
She lost.
Chloe could lose if she's not careful.
Chloe!
Fight set to go down next month on the 27th, late next month, and we'll talk more about it as the fight date approaches. In men's super middleweight news, ahead of his own fight this weekend, unbeaten up-and-comer Diego Pacheco talked about the Canelo versus Berlanga fight, saying, I feel like I should have had that fight with Berlanga, and then the winner would get Canelo, or something like that.
I agree.
That would have been fair. I think Canelo will stop him. I think Berlanga will maybe do better the first 3 rounds. I feel like once Canelo has found his rhythm and has found Berlanga's timing, he'll get him out of there. I guess the time is now for him. He's in his prime. I hope he takes full advantage of it. I hope he makes the best of it. And yeah, I want the winner.
He won't get him.
Nor should he. Even if he makes it past Messias Sulecki this weekend, that doesn't mean he's ready for the likes of Canelo Alvarez. And he shouldn't be in a rush to get there just to get paid, just to make a few more dollars, because that's the kind of thing that ruins fighters. Though what he said about Edgar,
The suggestion that he should have got to Edgar first and maybe the winner gets Canelo Alvarez. I agree with that.
that's why that fight ain't got no sizzle, no intrigue, because it wasn't built up enough. It's not enough for you to say that, well, this is another chapter in the Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry, because that rivalry really only works when the two guys are perceived as being on the same level or a similar level, like Oscar De La Hoya and Felix Trinidad, like Canelo Alvarez and Miguel Cotto. And no one likens Edgar Berlanga to those Puerto Rican fighters, even though he's Puerto Rican himself. That don't make him Miguel Cotto or Felix Trinidad.
Nobody thinks he's on Canelo's level.
If he's even made it this far, it's because he's been protected from so many formidable fighters, Diego Pacheco included. Now, maybe Edgar is a little bit further along in his career than Diego Pacheco is, but had they fought,
Yeah, I think Diego would have beat him. I think Diego would have knocked him out.
Diego isn't as talked about as, say, Edgar Berlanga or Christian Mbilli, some other unbeaten up-and-comers at this weight. He's not as talked about as they are, but if you've seen him, he is a more talented fighter with more tools, more of a ceiling than Edgar Berlanga. Edgar is just a sheep to the slaughter. He's just cannon fodder for Canelo.
Him and Diego would have been a more even fight between unbeaten up-and-comers. In a battle of the unbeatens, a more intriguing fight and a more even fight. I think Diego would have won.
Diego says he wants the winner. In all likelihood, he might get the loser. He may yet get the chance to face Edgar Berlanga after Canelo Alvarez is done with him, what would prove to be little more than just an acid test for a Diego Pacheco.
You don't think Canelo would fight Diego?
Diego is in line to fight for the WBO title. That's the route that he's on, the WBO route. It's not outside the realm of possibility that Canelo might go after him too.
It's possible. It's just, I don't think Diego's on his radar.
I think Canelo knows about as much about Diego as he knew about William Skull, and in Canelo's own words, he never heard of the guy.
I don't think he's heard of Diego either.
So while it is possible that Canelo could fight him, I don't know how probable it is that Canelo would fight him. I don't think Diego is on his radar. Diego's got his own problems. He's got this upcoming fight with Poland's own Messias Sulecki. You may be familiar with that name. That's the same Sulecki that fought Daniel Jacobs back in 2018, Demetrius Andrade in 2019. I remember a ways back, there was a lot of talk about Sulecki fighting Jermall Charlo down there at middleweight. I remember there was a lot of talk about that. Messias was supposed to fight him, but it never materialized.
It didn't happen.
Circa 2021-2022, Messias Sulecki decided to move on, and he fought Angel Hernandez in June of last year, and he fought Rowdy Montgomery in May of this one. He's on a 4-fight winning streak. He's won 4 fights since his decision loss to Demetrius Andrade.
Now he's fighting Diego.
Diego Pacheco, who sports professional record of 21 wins with no losses, no draws, 17 knockouts. I would say that of the two, young Diego is the stronger, more concussive puncher, where Sulecki is more experienced, sporting a professional record of 32 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 12 knockouts, having never been knocked out
in 34 professional bouts.
Kind of looks like a Polish Jason Statham.
He's not a little guy. He stands in at about 6'1", decent boxing ability. What I remember about Maciej Sulecki watching him in action is he can move a bit. He's got movement and a decent straight 1-2, a decent jab. He gave Daniel Jacobs a lot of problems with that jab. I remember he made Daniel Jacobs look human way back when in 2018, but that was in 2018. A lot of time has passed since then.
Maciej Sulecki is 35 years old to Diego Pacheco, who's 21. Maciej, he's not the oldest guy around, but he damn sure ain't the youngest.
Though because he did see action earlier this year in May, he won't have any ring rust to have to shake off the night of. This fight, I liken this fight to Christian Mbilli's last fight with Sergey Didivianchenko, an acid test against a seasoned veteran. That's what Sergey was. That's what Sulecki is. This is Diego's acid test.
That's the dichotomy of this fight, and I like it.
Now, in Diego's last fight, this past April, against Sean McCalman, he looked human for the first time. He didn't look too good in that fight, didn't look too hot. He was fighting a smaller fighter with a lower center of gravity. I remember Diego was getting hit with a lot of right hands.
I remember that Sean kept catching him with that shot. He kept catching him with that punch. We need to see better range control from Diego Pacheco in this upcoming Sulecki fight so that he's not in line for looping rights.
Better range control via the jab to manage the distance, stay out of harm's way, and set up his own punches.
Where it gets interesting is that Maciej Sulecki has a pretty decent jab. Decent 1-2.
I like Pacheco to win the fight. I like Pacheco to be the first to stop Maciej Sulecki. I mean, I know he's formidable, and I know he's proven himself durable in the past, but at 35 years old, I think he's in a place where a young guy, strong guy like Diego might stop him. I'm going with Diego Pacheco by way of knockout.
Though I can only hope that his last fight with Sean McCalman was a wake-up call for him, things he needs to work on and tighten up, because he'd been looking great up until his last fight.
This weekend's fight will be his first 12-rounder. So far, the most he's ever fought for is a 10-rounder. This is going to be the first time he's got a fight scheduled for 12, and we'll see how he makes out. But ahead of the fight, I'm going with Diego, and I'm going with Diego by way of knockout. Elsewhere in the division, yet another unbeaten up-and-comer, Christian Mbilli. Ready or not, Christian has positioned himself for Canelo Alvarez. Christian, who was last in action a little over a week ago against seasoned veteran Sergey Didivianchenko, mixed reviews as to how good he looked. It wasn't perfect in the eyes of those who have boxed for a living, but Christian Mbilli's record remains unblemished. And with another proving ground bout likely looming, a showdown with Saul Canelo Alvarez the coming year, it appears to be nearing. Mbilli, 28-0 with 23 KOs, topped former middleweight title challenger Sergey Didivianchenko.
What people are saying is that he should have been able to stop Sergey, but I'll ask you, who's stopped Sergey? The man's never been knocked out.
Putting in motion what many expect to be a collision with recent super middleweight title contender Jaime Munguia. Should Munguia defeat Eric Bazinian on September 20th in Glendale, Arizona, it's tough to compel Canelo to do anything. But we know Canelo will respond to a challenge, Mbilli promoter Bob Arum said.
That seems like wide-eyed optimism.
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, the same way that William Skull wasn't on Canelo Alvarez's radar or Diego Pacheco isn't on his radar, I don't think Christian Mbilli's on his radar. On Monday's episode of ProBox TV's Top Stories, analysts and former world title holders Timothy Bradley and Chris Algieri, who were both working for ESPN in Quebec City, Canada, and watched Mbilli closely, weighed in on his prospects. I see him as far as, will he be Canelo's next opponent? Algieri asked in regard to Francis Mbilli, a Cameroon native now based out of Canada.
Yes.
Is he him, as the kids say? No. I saw so many technical flaws. He was fighting a 38-year-old with one arm after a fourth-round Didivianchenko injury and was still getting hit. Hurt to the body sometimes, and he got tired. You gotta see, that engine isn't the same as it is against lesser competition. And Mbilli had been in there with a bunch of lesser competition guys before Saturday, Algieri said. Mbilli needs to tighten up those loopholes or they will undoubtedly be exposed by a champion, whether it's former junior middleweight champion Munguia or Mexico's famed four-division champion Canelo Alvarez. The big wide shots, the falling forward, the getting square in front of the opponent, the bending over, vulnerable for for uppercuts, he leans over his lead foot, Algieri said. As far as him taking over the division, I don't see it. Bradley told Algieri, I see the holes that you see, but based on Mbilli's energy, power, and potential, he would still want to see Alvarez versus Mbilli. As we wait, the likely one-sided Alvarez-Berlanga bout on September 14th in Vegas, a date with the WBC's top-ranked super middleweight contender seems more appetizing. And that's why Bradley admitted he participated in some reverse psychology by saying on the ESPN broadcast that Alvarez will stay away from Mbilli. Mbilli will be tough on anybody, Bradley said. You can put him in the ring against Canelo and he'll be tough. He's definitely dangerous. He has a high-revving motor. He has punching power. He can pressure Canelo. Bradley predicts Alvarez would prevail thanks to his counter-punching expertise and calm, his poise. Canelo might stop him late, Bradley said. However, the kid deserves a title shot, and that night might be brewing. I don't hate Canelo versus Mbilli myself. I think it's a better fight than the fight that he's about to have with Edgar. However, I actually like Mbilli versus Munguia a bit more than I like Mbilli versus Canelo.
Why?
Because it's a more even fight with a question mark. Who's actually better with that base style? Who's the better pressure fighter? Jaime or Christian? Now, granted, I'm already leaning a little bit more towards Jaime than Christian because I think he has a better engine, better punch resistance, and more power.
I don't have any questions about Canelo versus Mbilli as a fight. I think Canelo would get him. I think that even though Christian is big and young and strong and persistent, Canelo would beat him on points or by way of knockout. Canelo would get him.
For the aforementioned reasons that Chris Algieri offered up. I offered up those reasons myself. Pressure, guys. Canelo is not a fighter you just stand in front of letting punches go. He'll make you pay in between.
I'm settled on Canelo Alvarez winning that fight, whereas I'm a little bit more unsettled when it comes to Jaime. Jaime is no Canelo.
Canelo answered that question and created that separation, separating himself from the likes of a younger fighter in Jaime Munguia in his last fight.
You can put him in there with Christian, and it's the same fight. It's literally the same stylistic matchup, and I think the same thing would happen.
I would rather see Mbilli versus Munguia. Now, for us to get there, Jaime Munguia has to beat Bazinian in his next fight that for some reason is being broadcasted on ESPN.
I still don't know why that's not a Golden Boy promotion show, if he is still in fact being promoted by Golden Boy this side of the border.
You're crossing over to Top Rank and ESPN for Bazinian. Why?
I don't know, but for us to get to a Mbilli fight, he's got to beat him first.